Hello, and welcome to Collective Konversations. Today we're discussing a topic that affects millions of people but is often misunderstood. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. As our theme says, not all wounds are visible. Many people carry the effects of trauma long after the event itself has passed. PTSD can impact veterans, first responders, survivors of violence, people who have experienced accidents, natural disasters, childhood trauma, and many others. Our goal today is simple: to increase awareness, reduce stigma, encourage understanding, and remind people that healing is possible and nobody has to walk that journey alone. We have a special guest with us today, and Mr. Burton, would you like to handle that introduction?
Yeah, like I said before, this is really a serious topic. June is PTSD month, so I wanted to really bring somebody knowledgeable about those things and also other things as well. It's been on here before, so when you're a guest first, but then after that, your family, Dr. Stefan Ross. And I thank you for being here. We're talking about such a really touchy subject, and it's like PTSD is getting right off the bat, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's really a hot button topic in a lot of things. Real quick, I was looking at you'll like this. I was looking at a show the other day called The Cage, and it's from France, but they kind of made it. And the guy had suffered a real bad beating, and he acted like he was okay, and he just shrugged it off, even though the doctor said, "Listen," he was telling him about PTSD, and he was like, "Okay, but." He went in there and told the guy, no, he was fine, until he was getting ready to fight again. And all of what happened flashed in front of his eyes, and he couldn't move. And I'm like, wow. It was, just one of those things. So that's why we brought you on, talk a little bit about just really, just getting into the topic right now, just really understanding PTSD, not, definitely a response to something that's traumatic. Right. And I'll let you talk.
And one of the biggest things, even though we discuss about the traumatic events stuff, but what people don't realize is that it doesn't always have to be that person in that event. You can witness something like an accident or someone being brutally harmed or some elements of violence or someone's death, and you can also obtain the symptoms of PTSD as well as the person who's actually been in that event. And the body does a lot of things. It withdraws. It becomes agitated. You have anxiety. You can have, like you say, you can actually become paralyzed. And you can't even function to your normalcy that you would like to do. And the term PTSD is what is known today. Early on, early 70s, after the Vietnam War and stuff, people used to call it shell shock.
Wow.
Things of that nature.
Wow.
So people don't realize that I think his name was Lifton, Dr. Lifton, and Dr. Hampton kind of coined the phrase of PTSD because of people being shell shocked or Vietnam shock or things from the war and stuff like that. But you started to see that PTSD can carry on in so many ways: domestic violence, car accidents.
Right off the bat. All these things, you just hitting it right off the bat, because many people only think it only affects military veterans.
Right.
That's all we ever really heard. Not even the words. To the day you said that, yeah. I've heard that word, yeah. But I didn't even know it was really pertaining to post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's also sexual violence. Sexual assault, community violence, like you said before, seeing some natural disaster.
Yeah.
Natural disaster, medical trauma, and the loss of level is another one that we talk about. And, that's really, something that we talk about as well. But, just like you said before, just getting into just understanding it a lot, somebody that's surviving even from a car wreck, in a car accident, right? They may avoid driving, for that reason. Or, loud noises and make them kind of jump, or, like I said before, one of those things, it was for that guy I was telling you about on that show, The Cage. It was the walking to the ring. Is what got hit, because at the time, he practiced a little bit different, than
Right.
walking to the ring, and now it's just flashing back in his head. Oh man, it went all through me because I was like, man, this something. Because I wouldn't, I don't know. I thought he was gonna be able to shake it off, and he did shake it off then. He eventually did, but because he's facing things and just talking to people about things. And I think it's tough. And I let you talk a little bit because I think it is tough when it comes down to that part. When we talk about these events, domestic violence, childhood abuse, different things like that. It's horrifying because now your body is affected by these things.
And what's also the thing about that is that it's a haphazard type kind of disease, because what affects you one way could be the same event, can affect somebody else a totally different way. So now you have to kind of break down those things. And one of the therapies I use is emotion therapy, where you actually put them back through that event as far as they can go, to try to get over that event and types of things. But then there's elements that you can't do that to, because you don't want to take an infantryman and take him out into the field and start dropping firecrackers at him. You can't do that. Now they've been using VR machines. They've been using YouTube videos and things like that, but you can't consistently do that to everybody. Right. And then you don't know exactly how far and how deep. And then I was just talking. We were just talking, and then it's an even bigger scope for men at times, because men always have been brought up from the age of whatever to being an adult. You're the backbone. You're hard. You don't want to talk about this. You feel less than a man if you don't want to talk, or things like that. Sometimes you soft. But that's not the case. You're looking for therapy. You're looking for confidence. You're looking for the opportunity to be a better person overall. And sometimes, you have to let down some of those walls, personal walls, before you even get to the point of getting to therapy and having a conversation.
Right. See, and the theme being not all wounds are visible.
Right.
And they're not, and that's the thing. I think I was, talking to somebody, it was a while ago, but they were like, before COVID, they were like, if you go to the hospital, 70% of those people, he didn't do a study, but he was like 70% of those people up there because of worry and anxiety. Right. It's caused them physical problems now,
right,
but it was worry and anxiety. And I know even when I was a kid, I know I had suffered from, some things as far as my body, definitely my hair falling out from stress basically, body betraying me over things I couldn't really control anyway, and that's the thing. I don't want any kid, adult, to actually, have to struggle with that when we have so many different things. I was just meeting before we got on, just meeting with somebody about, help, some mental health professionals. And it's needed. It really is. It's needed, generations who I was meeting with, and I think, just introducing ourselves. And we need to know more about where these people are and get them linked to, the professionals. Like I said, he's a doctor. I get it. I'm not saying I don't take it lightly, when I say that, because even like you said, when you said that about shell shock, I heard that before, but that's, to me, and you'll know this, and like they banned it now, it's the Oklahoma drill. And I know this is off but it does come back because people
still remember.
People, that's the thing. That was man. You talk about it,
and you think about it. There are so different, so many different dynamics that you have. People who remember the drill, and then you have people who were participating in the drill but can't remember, because now they've had some concussions behind that drill.
Exactly right.
So now you're looking at two different things: the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, the mental aspect.
I can remember it, and when I do remember, I'm not. And it's that the only thing that made me feel that way was when I was on the I was in Carowinds, and I was on something called a drop zone. It's the anticipation of what's about to happen,
right?
And there's no getting around it. You know what I mean? And now I'm putting.
Isn't that the most things in life? And the most difficult things we face in life, the anticipation is usually the worst.
Yeah, you're right. So
I want to, and I think that's huge. Is I guess I'm looking from the scope as a parent, even adult caregiver of any kind for children. there are times where we know that our children have obviously gone through trauma, the death in the family, But what are some steps that we know that we should automatically take? My 6-year-old just lost a grandparent, before, are there steps that we can take before it becomes a problem?
Real quick, we're gonna answer real quick. The hidden symptoms of PTSD. And then we'll get to that.
Okay.
The hidden, symptoms, because it seems often invisible, PTSD does, right? And many, they say they're fine externally, kind of what you're saying now. They say they're fine externally, but then they end up having flashback nightmares, and unwanted memories of certain things. And that, kind of these things are on the surface now, but, I was just picking a little boy up today for summer camp. And he said, I had a nightmare. That's what he was telling me, and I was just trying to talk to him in the way I was talking, but just kind of saying he was telling me that it wasn't real. I said, because you see your mom up there, because you're supposed to see your mom. So he's like, yeah, I know, but the way he was describing it was real to him. It was real to him because he was like, this person was in it, this person was in it, and that's what he said. And so.
I think that goes back to what you were talking about, each person.
Yeah, being affected differently. It could be, like you said, the same exact event. And if that person perceives that to be the worst thing that's ever happened to them, then that's a traumatic event to them. And whereas you may not think it was, that big a deal.
Like you were talking about your child experiencing death, one of the biggest things about that is that you have to take that child and kind of walk them through the memories of the positives that you had with that person or that person you experienced with. Then not only that, you kind of break it down to them, and it really depends on the age of the child. You can go back to the point of having coloring books and show them, the cycle of a butterfly, or a cycle of life, but you have to kind of break it down to that individual, whatever size or mentality that person is, and kind of bring them along, because, you don't want to get to the point where, like he said, a child's having nightmares, or a child is sleepwalking or something of that nature. You want to kind of, and you may even have to have a couple nights when, dad sleeps with the child, or mom and dad sleeps with the child, or you give them, what I would call a pacifier, or a teddy bear with granddad's or grandma's t-shirt or something, or something like that, or plant a flower together, so you have an opportunity to see how it grows and expands. And there are so many different new nuances for therapy now. So but once again, I can't go in there and present my therapeutic situation without screening that child and understanding that child's going to do this and do that. I've dealt mostly with adults who are been incarcerated when it comes to my therapy backgrounds and things of that nature. So now I'm looking at a whole different dynamic, because you have a room full of men who don't want to talk about anything, and if you are talking and you're in prison, then you're a rat. Right. So now you have a whole nother dynamic you have to talk to. So you just have to have some understanding the barriers, understanding the people you're dealing with, So that's exactly where you have to go with that.
And a lot of times when we talk about, these hidden symptoms, right? Talking about this, kind of avoiding places, avoiding people, avoiding conversations. That's how it used to be. They don't say nothing about it. Don't say nothing about it. But then, end up being, you see a lot of times resentment because of these things, right? Because we're not even able to bring them to the forefront and able to be, I might have a lot of difficulty with certain things because we're not talking about it. A lot of times in a cultural sense, just don't say nothing.
Right.
Or just go into your room. Or, oh man, forget about that. Don't worry about that. Well, that's the thing.
Even though in the dynamics of talking culture, if I'm not mistaken, the statistics are that, getting post-traumatic stress treatment is like an 8.4 percentage in African American culture, where it's like 7% in Caucasian culture, and it breaks all the way down to like the Asian culture, where it's 4%. And you can kind of see that in aspect of how the dynamics of the families are kind of the culture of those families are pushed along. You in the Asian culture, you get a lot of opportunities of meditation. It's kind of closed culture and stuff. And you go to African culture where you don't talk about mental health. You don't talk about any of that. It's just shucks. And then on the aspect of that is, in African American culture, you very seldom trust doctors.
Yeah.
So now you have a whole other dynamic you're dealing with for that treatment aspect of it too.
And that's why, not going off topic, but saying a little bit about it. But that's why when I was in there talking, with the representatives from Generations, is talking about definitely the familiarity is good too when they see you, right? When they see you more, they more or less prone to be not so much standoffish to you because they see you. Number one, they see you in a human light, but they also see you now and this is your profession, this is what you do. Yes, it's what we do, right? And that's why I was, kind of meeting with them, kind of, coming up with some different type of places because, like I said, it's one thing to, talk about PTSD, but there's another thing to not have anywhere for them to go. I mean, if they're struggling from this, right? That's one of the things, to speak about, we'll talk about later, but, it's definitely, people struggle with these things and when it's hidden, privately, and that's the thing as far as with anxiety, depression, the nightmares we talked about before, and just being emotionally numb. Because sometimes the strongest battles are the ones you don't see. They're not seen by people as well. I know people are, really struggling, from that, but also getting an understanding about that. I mean, that's what we're here today, to kind of talk about some understanding. Like I said, I thank you so much for being here because, like I said, even opening my eyes to a lot of ways about thinking. And I know, in my day, I could have used therapy a few times, I really do. And I think it's just, it's really, I think I think the landscape is changing a lot about mental health as well. But it can change it more if we keep talking about it. Like I said, I know not to plug to the thing, but break the silence. Right. Let's talk about it. I mean, and then let's get some help, for the people that need help. I mean, I think it's a big, it's going to be a big thing, that we do, I mean, and come up with as well. But I think there's a problem and the reason why we don't. And that's what we'll talk about the next segment. We always talk about it is breaking the stigma, though. He talked a little bit about it as well, breaking the stigma. Why are people avoiding seeking help? And you said a little bit about it. A lot of it is cultural, the social part about it as well. I said it on the air. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, when we were celebrating the seniors. I mean, from graduating college and also graduating high school, and I was telling them about the next step as far as those that are going to college. I know what I was telling them. I know I suffered from depression when I was in college, when I was a sophomore. I never felt like that before. Didn't really want to do anything. Barely just got to class, and I was suffering from depression. Went down years later, just like last month, we took a group of kids down there, and what do I see sitting on the table? Mental health, a flyer for mental health right there on the campus that I went to. I'm not talking about the fact that West Virginia State didn't have it. They probably did, right? But this was back in the 90s, so it was one of those things, it's one of those things.
If you did seek it out, you kept it a secret, and
100%. And something, but I didn't know. I was telling them, not being funny. I was telling them I didn't know where the infirmary was on the campus. Did you ever know where yours was? Well, of course you play football though. That's why. But you know what I'm saying. Right, but still, I didn't know. I mean, but it's very helpful to know these things. And I think a lot of we're really forward and up front in the college scene when we're dealing with this. Well, we need to be the same way in our communities as well and deal with this as well. Not be. I mean, even and you know this better than I do, because you lived up here. I know you went to Vegas and other places, but I don't know if you remember in the Red Brush, there was a medical building over there, and I think they did things like. But I'm gonna tell you what, it was a ghost. I ain't trying to be funny. It was a ghost town. Right. So I mean, really, to me, just being in that vicinity was big to me. And now the building just sitting there. Yeah. I hate that. And this is not me knocking the Red Brush or anybody. I mean, but it's just the fact that, like I said before, people don't know. They don't know. Like if we set up a shop, we're gonna set up some kind of food. Yeah, he don't know how to. I mean, really?
Right.
How do you know? How do you know we know how to do this and not just because I mean, but knock it off. But these stigmas we get over it. Like we said before, move on if you get hurt. Right? Some of the things we saw. Stop being weak because people sometimes see mental health as being weak.
The fear of the mental health is real, and then like you say, bringing awareness to not only the people, the community, and the families that it can be beneficial to get mental health, but also, I hate to say it, but employers.
Right.
Because if you don't provide them with some element, now that employer provides you with that stigma once again.
Right.
So, and people, well, as well I do, you talk about the red brush and what else. What's the first thing they're doing? I'm not losing my job because I had a headache yesterday, or because I had a nightmare last night, or my husband caught me sleepwalking outside. So now we have a whole other dynamic to deal with. That's employment. That's so that dynamic of getting over fear is once again, it's a slow step process. You got to crawl before you walk, and then you got to definitely find out and know where your facilities are, whether you have a medical facility, a mental health facility, and then like you're talking about. When you go to college, you can do a tour of the college campus and everything, and they'll teach you where your academic counselor is.
Right.
But they may skip the fact that you have a mental health counselor on campus as well. They just say, okay, this is a medical facility. You can go to medical or infirmary here, but they don't talk about there's a separate room or a separate nurse or nurse practitioner or LPC or MSW, somebody that can sit down and talk to you about mental health issues and stuff like that. Because we all know college is a new experience. You're away from home. You got your own room. You gotta deal with a roommate. If you don't have to deal with a roommate, you got to deal with meeting people from different states, different countries, and there's a lot of things going on. Joe down the hall is making shrimp fried rice and greens, and the whole hallway is thinking, now you upset about that, but now you got to be able to go down and talk to him and say, hey, can we do something different?
I would be amiss to say, the veterans, I thank them so much for their service. I mean, they've been, my dad was in the service, and I know, but they've been through a lot. Let's get it right. And sometimes, I know this is not me trying to make a controversial statement, but I'm gonna say the way I feel, underappreciated. I'm sorry, I do believe it. They're unappreciated, and I appreciate each and every one of the servicemen who's given their service for our freedom. Let's get this right.
It's overwhelming that they're underappreciated, underpaid, and undercared for. But they are the backbone of what makes our nation what it is.
The very reason we're allowed to have these open forum discussions.
100%.
And
I appreciate it so much because I know, that's one of the things. And even they, you got to think, this is just a training when they train, right? You would think they train to be mentally strong, really tough, beyond what we could ever think. Beyond whatever we could think. But now I got to come back, deprogram, get counseling for something that, and that's the thing. So it's very vital.
Yeah.
In order for them to move on with their lives, it's very vital. But then I'm feeling weak, because of this, and they shouldn't. I think, and I think that's, one of the things about, a survivor of abuse, they may, remain silent because of the fear that they won't be believed. That traumatic stress again, coming back up now to know, that this is, something because of the trauma they had to hide their pain, hide their anger, and I hate that.
I think it's clear to see why soldiers in particular struggle with it so much because, not only are they taught not to talk about weaknesses, they're taught about to have no, to actually develop the mentality that I have no weakness. And then, like you say, now the battle's over, and now we want to put them in therapy and ask them to be vulnerable. And we spent those years training that part of their brain almost out of their personality, and now we need them to turn that off. And it's just you really feel for them.
You think about the longevity. You go in, The average soldier going in 18 to 21, and if he stays 4 years, 6 years, whatever the case may be, those are so informative years of your life when you're doing everything anyway. So now and then if you're in a situation where you go to war, you go to battle, now you've added even more. Now you're releasing, you don't have an automatic job. You got to take care of a family. You got to take, so now compounding things on top of that, And for that same token, I hate to say this, think about guys who are released from prison.
Yeah. I mean, that's right.
It's a whole nother, it's a whole nother dynamic, and it's so scary. You've been a hard baller and a tough guy for so many years, and then you've done 10, 15 years, and then you release back out into the public sector, and you expect them to go right back into the whole.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. PTSD in relationships, right? It affects the families. Trauma does. It affects friendships. It affects marriages as well. But it also affects, a lot when you say about the families. A lot of times people stop expressing their emotions. They came back differently than they were before, right? My dad said that before. His brother, he wasn't the same guy. Wasn't the same guy when he came back. And that's the thing, that trauma, and the things, because it damages trust. Trauma does. It damages your trust, and that's one thing. People become, a lot of times they become distant because they trying to protect themselves.
Right. Not only that, but then, like you said, the relationships that they had with the wife or the kids, the daughters, or whatever the case may be, and the sons, you have been traumatized. If you've just been to basic training, you've been traumatized. Then you go to your duty station, you've been traumatized. Then you go to war or just a battle, you've been traumatized, and you continue. Then you come back, and everybody you deal with is an equal or above, and you have a chain of command, so you have the respect and this, that, and everything else. You have to listen to that. Then you come back to the household that's been running for the last 4 or 5 years without you. Now you're fighting for the fact of dealing with your PTSD, but also the chain of command that you're not in no more.
Right. So, I think it's what you said, and then it's that as well. And this goes back to when we talk about trauma and domestic violence, there's different things, especially domestic violence when it comes to it, because a lot of times, that person, right, may have spoke about it once, but then went back and now just stop speaking about it. Right. Just stop it, but it's still going on. Right. It's still going on, but just stop speaking about it and really changing a whole lot. And this is this is far out, man, but I used to do counseling, and it's one of those things where, and I was professional about it. Don't get me wrong. But one of the things I started to see is, it takes it takes you a lot to cut off the things in your life to come in and talk to you two, right? And cut it off. What happens is, even though I don't say it, you definitely affected. And they start to see that and start to ask questions to you. What's going on with you? Chad, how you, and start to piece things together. It's like, and one of those things is you have to be honest, but of course you can't delve all in it, but you have to be honest enough, because then again, I'm spilling the beans about myself. Right. What about you? I get it. It's not about me, as far as, being the therapist, but it's one of those things. It's hard, and that's what I'm saying. When you keep things in, it's very hard to keep them uncovered, because it's hard to do. And if you do it for a certain amount of time, and then what happens, right? It's one of those things. Sometimes, in a marriage, maybe not with domestic violence, but somebody that's suffering from trauma, if somebody, definitely starts to, kind of separate from them, and come distant, it's because of them. They don't care no more. And it's not that they're suffering from things, this trauma that they're having, and they need help. And that's the thing, that we speak about as well. And that's why sometimes, even this is in substance abuse, we talk about, finding 5 people that you can kind of talk to that can, I know we can say keeping it real, but definitely know some of the ins and outs of the struggle that you might be going through. So they won't just be, thinking they can listen without judgment, basically. Same thing with the trauma, with PTSD. They need to learn more about it too, right? Just like we are today, learn a little bit about it, and that just stick with me when you said that. I'm gonna go look at that too when you said that about shell shock because I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of it being missed. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not trying to be funny, but you don't know what you don't know. And I hate that because it's like, what do you mean? But I mean, it's probably a lot of people said, oh man, that's, shrugged it off as that. And what I mean, really, going back to not trying to down football, going back to what you're saying. What do you mean concussion? Yeah, concussion. Yeah, many of them. Yeah, damage in the brain.
Yeah,
trauma is what it says. Trauma to the brain, right?
Right.
Those things over and over again. It started, and I'm so glad because people love football. Let's get it right. I do too. But in order to preserve that, you're going to have to make it safer. And they have. They have. And like I said, I'm not saying they have. Certain things you can't do. If I keep running to you, it's just the way it is.
Right.
Let's get it right. But definitely, limiting the occurrences could help, right? And also, kind of listen to that. We should talk about that one time about the concussions and things like that with athletes. And they've done a great job with that. And because of education. Same thing we're doing with PTSD in a smaller scale, but still yet getting the right people and get them in the seats, right, in order to talk about the things that they need to talk about, because I think that's where it comes from.
That we talk about the fact that people remove themselves from situations. We also have to look at the other side of the situation where a person who has PTSD or other mental issues can become codependent on a specific person. So they don't want to be away from that person, or they can't do other things. A woman who's been sexually assaulted, sexually abused, her husband came in to rescue her and has been a good friend to her and this and everything else. But now she can't really function without her husband being around or without her boyfriend being around because she's become codependent on that individual. So, you just have to pay attention to the signs and the symptoms of how things go because, the ultimate goal is to continue to be an adult, functioning adult in society where you're not really so dependent and you don't have as many symptoms and things that are noticeable, and you try to maintain.
Right. And I do believe that. That what you're saying as far as that, the next thing we talk about, healing is possible.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the thing, as high as possible. Recovery is real, so is hope. But recovery is real. But I think when we talk about healing, it's one of those things when we talk about forgiving. It don't mean it's right. It don't mean when you forgive someone, it doesn't mean that you think that what they did was right.
Right.
And healing don't mean always forgetting either. It's one of those things, and that's the thing, it's learning to, definitely have a healthy coping skills. It is. Believe it or not, taking a deep breath is a tremendous coping skill that people could really utilize a lot more. And I'm telling you, it's one of those. What are you talking about? I'm telling you, a parent. This is from a parent taking a time out or counting to 10 before they handle the situation is a lot better than just going diving in there. Trying to. It just is.
Yeah, a little box breathing work wonders.
It just is. I know. I love your parents, but definitely disciplinarians, right? But how many times you think, this is the thing that, when we talk about, dramatic things, definitely one of those things. It's my phone, I think. Yeah, it's right over there. But definitely one of those things. I'll cut this out. I'll wait. Okay. You go back. It's going forward. It's definitely one of those things where I do remember the times where but it doesn't get me like that as well. As far as that's not the traumatic things. That it was the things that I didn't listen to. Those are the things that I really I don't remember the discipline. Fine, I get that. But I know there's people that delve in a little bit to abuse. I'm not saying that I was. I'm not saying you were either.
Right.
But it's definitely something that, people have to understand that, in order to heal, sometimes you have to understand that, it's hard to build that trust when this is what we've done. And we talk about it even with, when we worked at Presley and that place like that, certain discipline just doesn't work. Not because you're doing it all wrong. You're tearing down the trust where you should be building it back up again, right? Being reliable. If I'm just coming in whooping or coming in just spanking you and that's it, when do we share a meal together? When do we do these things together, right? And it becomes a traumatic thing. I mean, I'm gonna let you get into this. I'm gonna be quiet for a second, but real quick, some healthy things, and I'm gonna talk about this real therapy. Support groups is a great thing as well to use. Faith communities, exercise, journaling, healthy relationships, and also mindfulness and practices. Real quick, when we talk about traumatic things, I want you to get into this real quick. Some the things that I want to say about is people that get into some really, really, really sadistic type things due to trauma is linked to a lot of that trauma, like a lot of people who've done terrible things to people.
Yes.
Linked to a lot of trauma.
The trauma, it's sad to say, but when humans hurt other humans, a lot of times it's linked to the fact of something that's already happened to them. You go into the aspects of, I hate to say it, but pedophilia. Most people who've been abused abuse others, and if you can't break that link and break that cycle, then therapy is kind of almost mute. You have to recycle and rework and redo, and then then you can't go into things like emotional therapy and things like that. You have to find other ways to break that cycle.
Right.
So and like you say, healing is definitely possible. With PTSD and things like that.
Right.
But if you don't take time, and if you consistently allow that individual to work in that arena, then they're going to maintain that traumatic feeling and that the mind is a crazy thing. The mind will click on the other side of that, and what has been traumatic for one person becomes a joy for that other person. And that person that finds the joy in that, he'll go out and traumatize as many individuals just to chase that joy. It's almost like a addict chasing a high. So you have to break that cycle, break that chain, and find what works for that person to deal with that healing. And whether it's sitting down with other people who've been traumatized or being one-on-one with the individual who has a more in-depth thought process with you,
Right.
or running a faith-based situation where you feel you can find the healing from a higher power. There are so many other things you can do, but you just want to make sure that you're working towards a goal of healing and not a goal of promoting that individual's joy of trauma.
The only reason why I even said that anyway, because majority of people do not do that suffer from PTSD.
Right.
I mean, it really don't. I mean, but it doesn't. But also, the trauma doesn't predetermine someone's future either.
Right.
That's why I'm going into it, because you can go down a rabbit hole with it. I mean, and see. I mean, man, and link a lot of link to it. I think that's why prevention is way better than being reactive. I really believe that.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask your thoughts on. Are we doing enough on the prevention side of things? Because I was just looking at the numbers the other night. They're staggering. The numbers of convicts that have been convicted of violent crimes.
Right.
How much they've been victims of physical violent trauma. It's just common sense would tell me, like, let's start pouring some resources into prevention and try to break that cycle. Are we doing enough, or is that going in the right direction, do you think?
I definitely feel that, compared to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, where we are in the 2000s, things are trending in an upward fashion. But we also have to realize that there's so many different dynamics to dealing with just the point of violence. You start breaking down violence, and the natures of violence in the United States goes from cultural to proximity to what they call I can't think of the name of it, where 9 times out of 10 someone gets killed by somebody they know. See what I'm saying? So now you have that whole dynamic community in aspect. So, you have high aspects of violence when you start talking gang violence. You start talking, other things. So the aspect of violence is only going to be changed by the point of opportunities for education, opportunities for financial gain, to balance some of the scales.
Just by you sitting here, I started to realize something that you said. Like yesterday, I knew a little bit about the direction we wanted to take the show to this week, but until you just said that, and then just even talking today, it is a broad area.
Yeah, it's huge.
PTSD is a broad area, but it brings on so many other things, to bring to the table, and that's the thing. So when we talk about, healing, when we talk about, preventive things as well, not only is preventive being on this time reactive of how to prevent it from happening or from getting even worse, or just definitely, I think a lot of times bringing it to the table is a big thing, and bring it to the table. And now let's get the help we need from the professionals that can help you as well.
And then, like you say, PTSD. When you say PTSD, it's an ocean of things, but you're going to have to break down the point of PTSD in the community, or PTSD within the home, PTSD veterans, PTSD first responders, PTSD children, PTSD. And those are so many different dynamics. And then you have professionals. Even you have professionals who can only specialize in first responders, or who can only specialize in veterans. So
you're right, and that when you say that, I mean, like I said, for just to mention the fact, and this school has had some terrible tragedies. Midland Trail High School, in the past few years, they've had some terrible tragedies. Where kids have passed away on a couple of different occasions, right? But one thing you reminded me of is the fact that that day or the next day they had some counselors in there, man. Hopefully, I mean, it's a traumatic event. Don't get me wrong, but definitely trying to soften the blow from the future, and definitely, kind of getting out there, and I think that's great. I hate the fact that they had to do it, but I'm glad they did it as well. Mm-hmm. But that's why I said I want it to be more in a bigger scope, right? I want it to be more, people have, medical cards, people have, things that they can pay for mental health. As far as, insurance and things like that, so they can pay for mental health. Let's get out there and let's do that instead of waiting, right. until it's too late. And it's never too late. Don't get me wrong. I know it's never too late, but a lot of harm is done. As far as that, a lot of harm is done.
And then you hit the nail on the head. That even though we are out here doing this, or you have people that's bringing PTSD to the table, and then you get people that actually want and need the help, and then you start looking at the point of socioeconomics and finances.
Right.
So now who can afford, or who's Medicaid or Medicare is going to take care of, who's not going to take care of, or who has health insurance, who doesn't have. Mm-hmm. And then you start breaking down the facts of the matter. With health insurance, do they cover this aspect?
Right.
And if they don't, so now that's a whole nother dynamic of and it's sad to say, and it's really hurtful. You have, I don't know any area where you can get mental health help completely free.
And that's maybe something to look into, because that's something to look into. I do believe that, and I'm like you, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think maybe, I'm assuming that, but maybe there is places.
I stand corrected. Go to prison, you can get. But I mean,
well, that's not funny, but that's I mean,
you go to prison, you get help.
But why don't we
Again,
flip it around and I'm not saying to not get it there, but why don't we get it
outside
before?
Get it before,
before that.
And you hear that. I think the argument against offering universal health care, and especially for mental health care, is you hear the economical argument, but to me that's totally illogical, because we know, scientifically how much, like we spoke about earlier, your physical health is affected by your mental health. Right. So if anything, by taking preemptive measures, to look out for your mental health just like we do our physical health. That would only benefit these insurance companies that.
Completely overall. And, it's been studies shown that people who stress so much damage the liver, damage to the lungs, damage the heart, so just being super stressful, because now you become a different person. I mean, you not only do you mentally be unaware and in pain, but you're hurting your body, you don't even know it until it's too late. Now, why did he die for a heart attack? He was going to work every day. He was doing this. Well, you don't know if he was stressed. He could have been stressed about bills. He could have been stressed about his wife. He could have been stressed about his kids. And that stress continues away. It's almost like dripping water on a boulder. It was a big piece of rock when it started, but 10, 15 years down the road, you got a pebble. It's been swept away in the rain.
And so now that we're, kind of talking about this and like I said before, I think, that's the beauty of, when we talk, it's like we go so many different ways, but it's stuff that's really meaningful, really needed. So we go from, sometimes I know we talk about surviving, but then there's also moving into purpose as well after the survival, because there is that. I mean, I think, survival is necessary, don't get me wrong, but the goal is to thrive. The goal is to move on, not just exist. And this is, definitely after the pain or the trauma that you've had and kind of moving forward as well. And I think, you have to find purpose. And like I said, through mentoring, a lot of times, and what do I mean by that? A veteran mentoring a veteran. A survivor, we talked about that earlier, a survivor helping a survivor as well. Somebody's walked through it, and counselors, like I said, for who have overcome trauma as well. And that's the thing, but also community members that kind of, they transform pain into service, and you have to understand these things. I was talking out there, to representatives of generations, just, it needs to be a collective of, like I said, I just called him yesterday. I'm just telling you, man, just having people step up and come in a lot of times it's a phone call away. I'm not saying they're gonna say yeah, I'm not saying it, but if they don't, just move on. They mean no harm, done. But I hadn't heard him in my ear anytime I need something. Just call, and that means something to me. It does. It means something because, like I said before, this ain't about me. But if I got the people who, and he spent years in school, years in school, right? And now it's time to harvest, and we talk about purpose and things of that nature, time, kind of spread that, to people who need to hear it. And I think a lot of people do need to hear it. And I do believe that. And
the more we talk about it, I think the more we do to remove that stigma. And I think with mental health, my humble opinion, that's step one. If we can get rid of that stigma and let's deal with our problems. And not even only that, let's have a checkup to see if there's any problems. Maybe we are fine, That's what we do with our physical health.
Breaking silence, try to touch it once a month.
Yeah.
Try to not just, okay, and then forget about it. Touch it once a month. I'm gonna tell you though, just like a lot of subjects we approach, right? But this is just one of those that you gotta be on your P's and gotta get people on here. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that talking about career, like we were talking about career paths, very important. This is very important, and this is one of the things you gotta handle it a little bit different, really, because you can't, it's not about me misspeaking. I do that all the time, not about on purpose, but I just do it all the time sometimes, right? But I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction, but I'm not afraid at all to pick up the phone and call somebody who's definitely knowledgeable in things that I'm not knowledgeable in, and come on and talk about these things, not pat myself on the back. I want people to know this. I want to get the word out. We get the word out so we can make sure we handle this. And then, like I said, PTSD month, didn't really know that until I looked and seen what is this month, what is, what are we, that's why. So I'm glad they're doing it. I really am.
Like you were talking earlier, having pamphlets and literature just around haphazardly, just because some people may not really know or understand what they're going through. And, and a lot of things that I learned doing residencies and stuff is the point of self-surveys. People do a pamphlet and add a self-survey into it, and it wakes them up, because you answer the questions, and then you got to go 3 or 4 pages down the road, and now they're going to give you answers to those questions. So those types of things will put more people aware and give them an opportunity to be aware that hey, I've been depressed for the last 6 months, or I've been anxious for no reason at all for the last 3 or 4 days, or I'm really stressed and I might need to go ahead and talk to somebody. And even it may not be a professional, but I can call and say, hey, Mom, what you doing? Or hey, Don, let's do lunch. Just the small things like that can change someone from getting that spiral. Because once you get in that spiral, their arms are too short to reach to the top, and if someone doesn't notice it, where does it go from there?
Right. I think you're right. Like I said before, I think the more we get it out there, the more we talk about PTSD, mental health, right? Those things that that people don't say nothing about. Those things are something we need to bring to the forefront, not only for kids, not only for young adults, for adults as well. I think it is. I think it's a lot of people that I'm not. Listen, everybody when they think mental health, they think there's a psychiatrist, there's a psychologist. I didn't even know the difference. I really didn't. I thought they were both the same. No, one prescribes medicine, one does not. That's the thing.
One got 16 years of school.
and you're right. But both have different way. And I'm not saying, but have different ways of kind of handling things as well. But I do, I think, I value both, like I said before. Value your time, like I said before. I appreciate you coming on. This is stuff that, I'm really not done talking, but we got to end the show. But it's not something, because I think it's fascinating. More and more just to get the word out as well. I think, like I said before, just having, forums like this helps. Bringing more people on as well helps as well. Like I said, I was willing to let you all do it. It's not about that, like, hey, I need to get on here and talk. No, we need to get it out there, the subject, and then we need to get the people in. So anytime you have anything, really, we can continue, like I said before, you're knowledgeable in a lot of the mental health, sector as well. We do it once a month anyway. We trying to get a little better schedule. And we went to guests, like I said before, to also, just handling some of the, the topics that we've had, on here as well. And we will continue to. We definitely getting the youth involved as well, starting to get the youth involved as well. We have definitely an initiative that, definitely do a youth, with the topics they want to talk about. Had just a little trial run real quick and we can finish up. Had a little trial run and they were, minds. Just brilliant minds. One talking about anime, and the other one talking about forgotten cartoon shows. But it's just a show. And I didn't even, when you say cartoon, I'm like, what are they talking? Because I don't even think they watch it, but they do watch them, right? They do watch them. And they're just, kind of talking about those things. This is what, we're here to do. We have a couple things for the summit coming up. Saturday at June 20th, Saturday from 12 to 2, we have a hot dog and barbecue giveaway. And it's going to, definitely roll out our TSK Pathways Prevention, for life, literacy for life. I think we're attacking both opioid, prevention plus literacy and get, definitely, getting the word out about, we have to get serious about this reading, and then, definitely the disparity that we have in all. It's not cultural. It's really a disparity of a lot of people who struggle and are struggling to read and not bringing it up, and that's the thing. So
I was just telling them how, South Korea in the 70s was so far behind in everything, and now they're like number 5 or number 7 economically nationally because of universal healthcare, universal education, free education.
Right.
But their literacy rate went from almost 30% to over 90% now.
Right.
So just a point of reading and then opportunity to getting into technology has changed a complete country.
Right. So that's like I said, I'm glad. I mean, that's always looking for different ways, you know, I mean, to kind of increase those things. And that's the big, and that is a huge way. And that's what we're, you know, trying to do here, you know, as well, trying to help out, you know, as much as we can, but also with partners, with the collective, right, of people that can help as well. So we have that going on the 20th. We still have the back to school, August the 16th, New River Park. Got to be from 2 to 6. I believe it's Shelter 1. We have information now. We'll have more information as well. We'll have more, you know, events coming up, you know, in the month of July. Just getting out there. I mean, it's summertime. Just getting out there and, you know, definitely, you know, going out instead of trying to come here all the time. That doesn't always happen, you know, and that's okay. We're willing to come out as well. I want to thank you all for listening. And like I said before, thank you for listening to, like I said again, the Collective Conversations. Thank you.